Record. So in the last lecture, we looked at mitosis. We looked at the cell cycle. Now we are going to wrap up some of this and this concept of mitosis, jump into replication for prokaryotic cells. Oh, and we'll talk about cancer as well, which, as we know, it is a loss of control of that cell cycle. But we have mitosis and we have meiosis. And mitosis and meiosis are both required for an organism to survive and advance. Okay. Remember, mitosis is involving the division of body cells, not sex cells. Sperm and egg. That's meiosis. And we'll talk about that on Wednesday. With that said, there's going to be some words here and you're like, dude, I thought you just said that was only for, this is not the sex cells. Well, not all cells are equal, all right? But let me kind of go through some of this and then we'll get to those words that you're like, oh, crap, I don't know. The biggest thing, it's growth and repair. This is division of body cells, skin, blood, liver. Any cell that's not Mr. Sperm or Mr. Egg, that's what this does. So it allows for growth and repair of us. If we're looking at flowering plants, it allows them to divide throughout their entire lifetime, okay? Trees increase in size every year because of mitosis, okay? Now, this is where you're going to be like, dude, I thought you said stem cells are a little different, okay? And I believe it's on the next slide. Stem cells are where everything begins, okay? Stem cells divide and they will give rise to whatever that stem cell has been told to divide into. There's one stem cell, and that can give rise to red blood cells and the majority of the white blood cells, okay? And all it is a chemical messenger that gets sent out to that stem cell, and when it starts to divide, it divides via mitosis. It will divide and give rise to a new cell, but then there's a cell that stays behind. That's the stem cell. But the one that it gave rise to can now become, through chemical messengers, it can become a red blood cell. Or a different chemical messenger told it to become a white blood cell, okay? But stem cells, when it all begins, they initially divide by mitosis, by giving rise to an exact copy. And then it's told to differentiate into something else, okay? So when you see, these words right here, you're like, isn't that all associated with sex and union of egg and sperm? Yes, it is. All right. The fertilized egg getting fertilized by the mature sperm, that is meiosis, that is sexual reproduction. All right. But to get to that egg, to get to that sperm, it starts with a stem cell, an oogonium and a spermatogonium. Okay. Egg and sperm stem cells. And those divide via mitosis and then go through the various steps of meiosis. Okay. So those words down here, they're not in the wrong place. It's just, that is what happens. Okay. There's some mitotic divisions within the sex cells only at the stem cell level. Okay. Once they are given rise to, then they undergo the phases of meiosis. And that's what we'll talk about on Wednesday. All right. Cut heals, broken bones are mended. Again, this is growth and repair. Okay. Growth and repair. All right. So this is probably, again, I'm more of a eukaryotic animal person, human, when it comes to biology. So I look at it as growth and repair. You could talk about flowers and stuff. That's cool. But I look at it through the eyes of somebody who deals with the human body. And here's what I was talking about with stem cells. Again, they give rise to various different types of things. So, and in honesty here, guys, if you want to look at these two things here, you can. We're going to look at cloning in chapter 14. We'll talk a little bit more about cloning. I've updated those notes, so I'm pretty sure I have all that up for you now. So we'll dive into some of the cloning aspects and how it's done, because that's kind of the cool thing, even though none of you are probably going to ever, do it in a lab setting at all at higher levels of education at bigger universities and whatnot. But the process of it is cool. And there are multiple different types of cloning that you can do. Reproductive cloning, where you get new eggs and new sperm, primarily done with eggs. Therapeutic cloning to get new human tissues being made, which they use a lot of animals to do, where they have injected our DNA into theirs, incorporate into their DNA, and then they make ears, various different ligaments and tendons. So it's a fascinating world when it looks into the various different types of cloning. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. And there's a couple interesting documentaries on Amazon Prime, I believe, that kind of talk about stem cells, if you're curious at all. It's called The God Cells. And you could probably find it wherever, but I saw it on Amazon Prime. It's fascinating. It looks into the world of stem cells, stem cell research, the hurdles that have to be overcome here in the United States compared to around the world when it comes to that type of research. But it's fascinating, and it kind of goes into kind of the money behind it all. So interesting. The guy started off trying to be kind of objective in his view of it, and then he injected his biases into it. So I take it with some of a grain of salt, some of it, because he ends up getting some of the treatments that he was trying to do research and report journalistically on, and then didn't do it, but whatever. But it's a pretty interesting documentary if you want to go follow it and watch it. And this just kind of shows reproductive and therapeutic cloning, but we'll get into that in chapter 14, like I said. So we have the phases of mitosis. Probably a sure bet that it's probably on the exam as a short answer. Cancer is sometimes a good question to ask as a short answer question on an exam. Understanding characteristics of it, the various different types of it, what you can do to prevent it. I mean, that always makes a fantastic question. When it comes to cancer, it's just out of control growth, okay? Abnormal growth. That's all it is, right? And its characteristic hallmark is tumor, something that's palpable, something that you can touch and feel. It forms a tumor because it loses the ability to stop growing on top of stuff. And I believe that's on the next slide when we go through those. But when we look at tumors, when we look at cancer, we have two types of cancer. That cancer that is malignant and cancer that is, well, benign. But they usually just put non-malignant. Okay, malignant, non-malignant. That's generally what they use now. The difference between something that is benign or non-malignant is that it has this connective tissue capsule. Okay, it's encapsulated, so it walls it off. So I'm just gonna, draw. Let's say these are cancer cells. Okay, and not drawn to scale, right? But it'll be kind of, this would be the tissue. Okay, this is the tissue. And you'll kind of find them embedded within it. Excuse me, goodness. When something is encapsulated, it has a thick connective tissue capsule around it. Okay. These are all my cancer cells. Okay. And it'll have a capsule around it. The great thing about this, having that capsule, it does not invade neighboring tissues. And it doesn't spread. It stays there. Now, it's still cancer. It's still bad, but at least it's not invading tissues. If it doesn't have that capsule around it, it's referred to as malignant. And the bad thing about this is, it can invade neighboring tissues. Is all it has to do, guys. Cancer just has to touch another tissue, and cells flake off onto it. And now the cancer cells can start to invade that tissue. So it's not a good thing. Okay? Cancer cells, when they're malignant, they can spread and that's what metastasis means, to spread. And a lot of times when it comes to cancer, if it is malignant and it has spread, you don't catch the primary cancer, you catch the secondary cancers. And that's when, that's usually not a good outcome. Okay. When it comes to cancer, all it is just basically a mutation in those genes that regulate that cell cycle. Okay. Remember those 3 checkpoints that we talked about. If there's any type of mutation there, these cells are allowed to continue and continue and continue to divide. Okay. Now, this is very gradual. Okay. Some cancers are very aggressive. The vast majority of them, though, they're pretty gradual. I know, with ovarian cancer or cervical cancer, it's really slow, and you may not even know, the symptoms aren't necessarily like, oh my gosh, I have cancer. It's not like skin cancer where you can visually see the difference. It's not like breast cancer where you can palpate and feel the lumps. You should be doing a monthly test, especially if you have a family history of it. But when it comes to like cervical cancer or ovarian cancer, the ovaries or the uterus, those things aren't palpable in those regions. And it may just seem like because this is for a woman, obviously, it may just be like a wacky thyroid issue that you may think it is. You may see some weight gain and not truly understand, and not have any of the telltale signs of cancer. And then a few months down the road, you go in and you're just like, I have all this bloating and I don't understand. And then they do some imaging down there. It's like, oh my God, you have a grapefruit on your ovary. So some cancers are very gradual and some are very fast, and some may take several months, even years, to be very obvious. Okay. Again, insurance is now paid for a yearly exam. Go in, do a yearly exam. Okay. There may be something in the urinalysis. There may be something in the blood work that lets them know. There's some markers here that indicate, blah, 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 blah. And getting that looked at and taken care of, can save your life. When it comes to characteristics for cancers, there are 4. 3 on this one, and then I have another major one on the other slide, along with 2 other potentials. So when it comes down to it, there's like basic 6 characteristics here that you can try to remember. The first one here is lack of differentiation. It's not specialized. That's what that means. Okay. It's non-specialized. All right. When cancer cells are allowed to continue to replicate, their DNA is usually screwed up. Obviously, the checkpoints are mutated. When it comes to DNA that's not necessarily 100% kosher, there are potential defects in there for other stuff as well. And these cells are not giving rise to, let's just say, skin. Okay, so skin cells don't divide and give me skin cells. Skin cells give me divide and give me a non-functional cell or a liver cell. Okay, it divides and doesn't give me a liver cell. It gives me some non-functioning cell. So they are not specialized. So they don't function. tissues start to diminish in their function as well. So if a liver cell all of a sudden doesn't start dividing properly, it doesn't give any more liver cells, the liver diminishes in its function. And these things are immortal. Okay? These things are allowed to continue to divide and divide and divide. Right? They don't have those checkpoints that says, hey, something done wrong here, let's fix it. If we can't fix it, we kill it. And it loses that ability. So these things are immortal. They have abnormal nuclei. I just kind of made reference to that. Nuclei is where we house the chromosomes, right? The DNA. It can be enlarged. It can have an abnormal number of chromosomes. It could be an extra copy of a gene. It could be any of these things. It can even have no genetic information. Okay. Obviously, that's a defect. Okay. So you can have these abnormal nuclei. And it can be in any number of things. Again, the genetic material is all screwed up. They don't undergo apoptosis. This kind of goes hand in hand with being immortal, but I parse it out, or the book parses it out. Sorry. Okay. The great thing about having those markers there to tell the cell to stop dividing and fix it, or if not, go kill yourself. We also have a certain type of immune system cell called a natural killer cell. And these natural killer cells, they go around, and one of their jobs is to look for basically cancer type cells that have abnormal cell cycles. And those trigger them to go there and destroy. So if they have a different DNA at the checkpoints, usually that's going to have a different protein covering around the surface of the cell, and the immune cell can't recognize it. So the body just doesn't see it anymore. Well, it doesn't see it as something that's gone wrong. It sees it just as normal cell. And so it's allowed to survive. The fourth characteristic is it piles up, okay? It forms tumors, piles of cells. That's basically what it is. When two cells come in contact with each other, guys, they release a chemical that says, I know I'm touching you and I will not advance any further, okay? But with cancer cells, they don't release that chemical anymore that says, I'm cool if you're cool. It kind of continues to grow over and grow over and grow over, and then you have this palpable mass that you can palpate and feel. That is what a tumor is, okay? It loses, there it is. It loses what's called contact inhibition. Okay. Normal cells do that. Normal cells, when they come in contact with one another, they secrete a chemical that says, I'm here, I'm done. Cancer cells, they've lost that ability. So they form that palpable tumor that you can palpate and feel when you do a self-breast exam or a testicular exam, either one. The last two are not necessarily characteristics of every cancer, but these are some things that do happen with cancer. Metastasis. We just said it could be malignant or non-malignant, and if it's non-malignant, it's not spreading. So undergo metastasis would only be for a malignant type tumor, okay? And then even within that, some are more prone for malignancy to travel around than others, so. And the last one is angiogenesis. And angio means blood vessel. Genesis means formation of. Okay. So if you just kind of break, when it comes to, biology, science, when it comes to these type of words, just break them down into their component parts, and excuse me, you can really figure it out. So it creates blood vessels. And this ultimately is going to do two things. One, it's going to, what I have on the slide, obviously it's now tied into your circulatory system. So now all the crap that you're putting into your body is going to cause this thing to increase in size. So you're just going to feed the cancer, and it's going to continue to grow. All right. And the American diet is usually what feeds cancer cells. Okay. So if you eat like crap, there you go. More than likely. And I'll make reference to a book here in a second. It's a pretty easy book. Figure out what a healthy diet is. Come to my nutrition class. We talk about it there. I beat it into everybody every day. What causes cancer? So another thing too that this does, and this is just for me to talk, I don't expect you to know it. If I increase the blood vessels, if I'm creating new blood vessels, okay, this is on top of what you already have. So now I'm creating, and by extension, I have these new blood vessels. That means I can create a larger volume of blood now. So all of this adds to this concept of stress on the heart. Because if I increase the number of blood vessels I have introduced more resistance into the system. So the heart has to push. And anytime two things rub up against each other, they give resistance, and resistance gives me heat, and yada, yada, yada. It's something that I have to overcome from a physics standpoint. So now I've created more resistance because I've created more blood vessels. So the heart has to work a little bit more now to get past that resistance, normal. But I've also increased the blood volume, and that means more that the heart has to exert to push a greater volume of blood. And let's say you're eating like crap anyway. I mean, you probably don't have the best biological markers when it comes to not having or having a lot of fat within your diet. So chances are, if you have atherosclerosis, some hardening of the arteries. Arteries are soft and pliable, they pulse, and they help to propel blood along with the heart. Now these are stiff, so now there's no pulsing going on, so now the heart has to do it all itself. So now the heart has to increase the amount of force that it exerts even a little bit more so. So now you can kind of see, and let's say the blood vessel narrows. If you have a really crappy diet and you have a lot of fat in your diet, you can constrict that blood vessel. So now you have to push the same volume of blood through a smaller hole. Good Lord. Now your blood pressure goes up. You can have a potential stroke or heart attack or myocardial infarction or angina pectoris, any of those fun, fabulous things. So it really behooves you, and I just like saying that word behoove, to eat good and not eat like crap. So you can prevent all this crap from happening in your life. I yell because I love. And this just kind of shows you the progression and have it invading and spreading around and yada, yada, yada. I don't know. It's there, if that helps. This nice little kind of synopsis here of everything, organized. Tumor. Okay. I'm not going to ask you. If I did, it would be for a bonus. So don't worry about memorizing, oncogenes and tumor suppressor genes. These are just we all have these, okay? We have tumor suppressor genes, and they help us to, if the cell cycle is functioning properly, excuse me, it does allow the cell to stop. And these are the genes that code for that. So this is what has been defective in cancer cells, or people who do have cancer. This is defective in their cell cycle. This is what promotes them to try to fix it. And if it can't, apoptosis, programmed cell death. We all have precancerous cells, or what are called proto-oncogenes, okay? And there are some genetics that go in, that go with some forms of cancer. I get it, okay? But there are some proto-oncogenes that aren't necessarily tied to cancer, but they get affected when you eat the typical North American diet. Nutrition can, as we've discovered, can turn on and off genes. And the typical American diet is full of excessive amount of protein, excessive amount of simple carbohydrates, and generally larger amounts of saturated fats, the bad fats. This kind of diet actually turns these things called these proto-oncogenes into an oncogene, something that actually codes for cancer. There is a fascinating book, and this is it right here, okay? It's short. It's one of the most easiest reads that you could ever do. It's written by an MD, but it's something that you could give this book to your grandma, to your mom, to your dad, whoever who doesn't have any science background at all, and they can easily read this. They can easily understand it. There's a lot of fantastic ways to try to implement a healthy diet within there. This individual right here, this doctor, he had, I believe, brain cancer, a type of brain cancer that was pretty invasive. He beat it once and it came back again, and he couldn't beat it the second time. But it is a great book. It looks at a lot of research, and he does a lot of comparison with us and India within the book. At least it's gone through a few different printings, at least a couple printings that I know of. And it looks at how diet is very different between people in India and here in the United States. And we have the same basically precancerous cells, proto-oncogenes, and our diet turns them on and become cancerous, and their diet doesn't promote that. Give them our diet and yay, then those proto-oncogenes become cancerous. So diet can help prevent a lot of different types of cancers. I didn't say cure, but it can help prevent a lot of cancer developments, many different types of cancers. So what you eat is truly, truly, truly one of the most important things that you can do. That's why Biology 132 nutrition class is so important for everybody to take, not just, it fulfills a requirement. We talked about various different locations on a chromosome, and some is euchromatin that actually codes for stuff. And then there's this whole other stuff that doesn't code. And then at the very tips were those things called telomeres. And it's those telomeres that normally they get shorter, okay? At end of each chromosome, okay? And they actually, you can look at telomeres and you can figure out how old typically a chromosome is by looking at the telomeres, because they do get a little shorter with each division, okay? They kind of help to organize the chromosome, help kind of maintain it, sort of thing. But if you have a mutation here as well, it allows this telomere to now lengthen, and instead of actually get shorter with its division. And obviously, if it continues to get longer, then it's just going to continue to divide because there's more rope basically to pull on. So telomeres do have a very important role. You see a lot of commercials with a lot of makeup and whatnot um, that are touting this ability to, make cells look more useful, kind of help those telomeres not get degraded as fast, which helps to prevent some wear and tear, which is the sign of aging. So that's not necessarily cancerous at all. There is still shortening that occurs. You don't prevent it, you just slow it down a little bit. So with cancer, those telomeres get actually a lot longer. And that just can't happen with the application of any type of cream. So what can we do to prevent it? Here you go. Eating a healthy diet. What the hell is a healthy diet? Well, fiber. Eating fiber helps to trap a lot of excess fats that you may be consuming and allows you to pass them in your bowels, take a poop. It also helps to keep the intestinal tract moving and motile, and that helps to prevent some different types of cancers as well within the colon. Green leafy vegetables, they have a lot of nutrients. They have a lot of things called antioxidants within them. Those help to prevent a lot of inflammation and wear and tear in cells. And it's those antioxidants that help to prevent some cancer development. Vitamins A, C, and D. You could probably put vitamin E in there as well. It's an antioxidant. Selenium is an antioxidant. It's a mineral. There are a few other things that you can do in there. I just put these. These are the ones that are kind of most commonly associated with a healthy diet and helping with cancer prevention. Choose fresh foods. What does that mean? Fresh foods mean foods that are not in a can or foods that are not sitting on a shelf that can sit there for 6 months to a year. Okay. Nothing wrong with some of that stuff. In terms of nutrients, it's some of the stuff that they put in it to preserve it. Nitrates and nitrites are generally associated with upping your risk of different types of cancer. So that's a lot of consumption of it. But if you eat a lot of prepared foods that are soaked in nitrites, that is something of concern that you should probably try to change. Getting rid of genetically modified foods, again, just eating fresh foods in general. Reduce or eliminate processed foods. Now, sugar/fructose. Okay, fructose is your sugar found in fruits. I am not saying to get rid of fruits. In fact, there are a number of studies to suggest that, let's say you do have a high meat consumption diet. If you consume a very high meat consumption, red meat, and you do not consume any fruits or vegetables, the chances of you getting cancer are very, very, very likely. Let's say you do consume a lot of red meat, and let's say you do consume a lot of fruit. There are studies to suggest that your chance of getting cancer is pretty low. So consumption of a lot of fructose in the form of fresh fruit is not a bad thing at all. It's one of the best things that you can do. Now, if you're consuming a lot of simple carbohydrates that have a lot of pastries and crappy food like that, delicious as I'll get out, but they're not the best thing for you. So if you are consuming a lot of simple carbohydrates, sugars in that regard, it can cause a lot of inflammation, causes a lot of weight gain. Weight gain leads to even more inflammation, and that is the breeding ground for the C word. There are a number of bacteria that live within your large intestine, and they've been shown to actually bolster your immune system and help you to handle carbohydrates and fats and whatnot. And they are finding that if you were breastfed, you actually have a different, it's called a microbiome, you have a different number of bacteria within your microbiome than somebody who was not breastfed. So those individuals who are breastfed, they actually can handle fats better and carbohydrates a little bit better, more effectively than those who weren't breastfed. Now they're seeing that if you had a vaginal birth, you weren't born by a cesarean section, and you were breastfed, the combination of those two changes your microbiome dramatically compared to somebody who was not vaginally birthed and did not get breastfed. And there's another study coming out that just looks at the vaginal birth and what that does for the microbiome and your ability to process nutrients. So there's a lot of interesting stuff out there in this realm of even your mom's health prior to getting pregnant, your dad's health prior to getting your mom pregnant. There's a lot of things that go into it now that we didn't necessarily know 15, 20 years ago. With diet, also you need exercise and sleep. Okay. Exercise helps to lower your insulin levels. This creates a very low sugar environment. Again, cancer cells love the sugar, man. They love those simple carbs. Okay. That's what feeds these suckers. By keeping your insulin as low as possible, by keeping your blood sugar as low as possible, okay, still normal, 70 to 100 milligrams per deciliter is the normal, okay? But as long as you're within that normal range, you're perfectly fine, okay? So not going above 100 is what you really want to prevent. Exercise helps that, okay? It also allows for adaptation. It allows for growth and repair to occur normally. So exercise does a lot of fantastic things. Another one too that I put up here is sleep. If you are interfering with your ability to get 7 to 8 hours, okay, and answer this question in the text box, and you could put it private. I don't care. I'll use this answer as your attendance today. How many hours of sleep do you guys get? That's what I want to know. When do you guys go to sleep? Wow, I am shocked as all get out here. Okay. 5. Okay. Going to bed at 1 a.m. Oh my God. Cool. So a lot of you are getting some decentish sleep. There are a number of studies that are kind of showing if you are up past midnight, there's a different hormone that gets secreted in your brain that actually kind of hardwires you to actually go and find carbohydrate type foods. So, getting 8 hours of sleep is ideal. Okay, is ideal. And it allows you to repair the body. There was something that I think it just came out maybe a couple years ago, and it was looking at the regions in the brain where you form long-term memories, the hippocampus, perihippocampal region, some of those regions there. You have a secretion of certain enzymes that help to basically clean up what you learn throughout the day. It gets rid of the stuff, or it doesn't make long-term memories connect. Basically, doesn't allow these neurons to connect to form these long-term memories. There's actually an enzyme that gets in there and kind of cleans up the clutter. So everything that you've kind of been, bombarding your system with all throughout the day, if you've done some reinforcement with that throughout the day, looked at it over and over again, 2-3 times, these enzymes get released in there, and they kind of help to kind of clip away and get rid of the nonsense and help to kind of strengthen up those long-term memories so you retain more information, and you can recall that information a little bit more better if you kind of constantly work that over every day. So sleep is one of the most important things that you can really do for yourself in terms of this concept of overall health and wellness. And getting to sleep at a decent hour is the most important thing for some of you to do. So I'll get away from my dad moment there. All right. Minimizing your exposure to radiation and toxic chemicals, being aware. Here in the Midwest, we're exposed to a lot of radon, more so than any other region. Having a radon, just like there's a smoke detector, there's radon detectors as well that you can put in your house, and they beep and they go off if radon levels get to a certain level, because that's when you should get out of the house. And yeah, it's a process, but you got to have some kind of ventilation installed in your basement then if that's the case. And we have one in our house. The neighbors next to us, they had to have some special abatement. Basically, they had to have some kind of special exhaust fan put in their basement because they had high levels of it. So if you live on a basement, in a basement, on the basement level or whatnot, that would be something of concern just to be aware of. But like for toxic chemicals, if it says known carcinogen or known to cause cancer, probably best to not touch it with your skin because you'll absorb it and yada, yada, yada. You'll develop cancer over time if you're constantly exposed to that on the daily. Radiation can be from work as well, especially if you're in the medical field and you work in the imaging department. You're going to be potentially exposed to a lot of radiation, obviously, with x-rays. So you get your badge, you have a badge that you wear, and if it glows, that tells you you've been exposed to too much radiation and you get to go home for a few days probably. So, but understanding all of those things. Some things in cosmetics, certain hormone therapies, estrogen replacement therapies have been known to kind of increase your chances for cancer. Certain pesticides or herbicides have some toxic cancer-causing agents within them. A lot of those are being, kind of removed, but there are still some that are out there. Limiting your alcohol intake. Anything greater than 3 is generally going to be considered excessive. So if you're having more than 3 drinks a week, it's something to pay attention to, especially if you don't get enough sleep, have a crappy diet, all that fun stuff. Tobacco is a carcinogen. Really nothing else really easy enough to say about that one. And reducing your sun exposure. If you burn, the chances of you developing skin cancer goes up. I can't remember. It's pretty dramatic though, especially if you burned early. Let's say you got a sunburn when you were like 6 or something. Your chances of developing skin cancer are even more higher than somebody who didn't get it at 6. Maybe they got it at 12. So, but looking at moles, if moles are nice and round, and if all of a sudden you look at a mole and it looks like the state of Maine, probably you should, go in and have, a dermatologist check it out or your medical doctor check it out. But wearing sunscreen helps to prevent that. You still make enough vitamin D, so it's not like you're missing out on anything. So you're perfectly fine in that regard. And then lastly, if you have a family history of it, self-exam. You shower every day, right? So just take a quick feel, do your palpation exam on yourself. You can feel for breast cancer there. You can palpate that and feel for the lump. You could do it for a guy as well with the testicular cancer. So you can palpate the testicles there. And you can feel any sort of nodule. So, and some down there, guys, just because you feel a nodule, doesn't necessarily mean it's cancer, the bad cancer. It could be benign. A lot of times down there, there's some benign, different types of issues that can happen down there for no apparent reason. So it's just something that you have to monitor though.